Hey guys, I'm Jeremiah, and I love carnivorous plants, as you probably know, but I just wanted to start this off by just really thanking Kenny, because like any big event that goes on, there's always one person that really is behind it, and without Kenny, this event would never have happened. Mike, also thank you as well for all the technology stuff, because that's not always easy. So before I begin, I feel like if you're in this room, your story probably sounds somewhat similar to me. I was a kid, I completely fell in love with Venus flytraps. So my parents actually bought me my first Venus flytrap from Home Depot when I was about 5 years old, and I was just fascinated with it. I set it out in the garden and watched it literally for hours that day, hoping that it would catch a fly. And when I first saw it catch something in person, I was blown away. And it was one of the most amazing and life-changing experiences. And normally, like, you show a Venus flytrap to somebody and they think it comes from some deep, dark jungle. Now, maybe a lot of you are from North Carolina, so you do know it comes from the state and just into Southern Carolina. But outside of the Carolinas, most people are shocked to learn it comes from North Carolina. And so still trying to dispel that myth is something we should all work on, that they don't come from Borneo or some tropical rainforest. It's right here in North America. And then in 2003, I had the opportunity to go visit California Carnivorous and meet Peter D'Amato in person. And as just a little 15-year-old, meeting my hero was literally life-changing. He was my Michael Jordan. I would have rather met him than any celebrity on earth times 10. And walk up there, I was there 10 minutes before California Carnivorous opened. My whole family was in a 1977 bright orange Volkswagen bus. And we had just done a road trip all the way from Colorado, and my family's like, okay, we can stop in California Carnivorous and see this amazing nursery. I was there all day. So before he opened till after he closed, I felt so honored. He let me run around back behind the private area, and Peter was there to always point out something unique. I went back many times over the following years, and Peter would always mention, oh, how's your family doing? How's your grandma doing? And just that connection, that community is something that I've enjoyed so much in this wild carnivorous plant group. And then in 2005, I had the pleasure to go visit Henning von Schmeling. He was in Georgia at the time, and he was the creator of B52 Venus flytrap. And at the time, like, that was incredible. By far the biggest flytrap I had personally ever seen. Probably held the record for largest Venus flytrap for quite a few years after it. And so to get to see that, talk with him in person about how he was line breeding his flytraps to try and get something bigger and bigger each year was just stunning. But yeah, so I mean, I've tried to honor that. Like, I was super excited to be in the Guinness Book of World Record. I'm proud of that, but I think what represents it more is this lineage of carnivorous plant growers that you learn from the people that were before you, how they grow things, how they have succeeded over the years. And I think one thing that I would like to dispel today, that when I was first starting, the big rule of thumb was never ever fertilize your carnivorous plants. And while fertilizing is not going to bring a dying carnivorous plant or a dying Venus flytrap back to health, if you're doing everything else right and you have a very healthy plant, fertilizing is the best way to speed up the growth, give you an extra boost, and help you grow larger and larger carnivorous plants each year. So yeah, so whether you're just like me and been growing these crazy plants for 30 plus years, or just killed your first Venus flytrap, welcome, and let's get into how I actually grow my Venus flytraps. So I do hold the Guinness World Record. So my first year in 2001, I did grow a 5 centimeter trap. And 5 centimeter, I have seen other people that have grown 5 centimeter traps and recorded it. It was officially recognized in Guinness in 2021. And then in 2022, I was able to grow one at 66 millimeters, so 2.4 inches. I've been trying to beat that record ever since, and I've had them at 60 millimeters, but haven't been able to break that 61 millimeter record. So we'll see, it's still early in the season. I have a couple ones I'm excited about this year that maybe have a chance of doing that, and we'll move on to those in the later section. But so understanding Venus flytrap biology and then genetics and clone selection, because I have personally still never seen a wild Venus flytrap in North Carolina. So after this conference, gonna make a road trip to go see some of those. From what I've heard, they're relatively small. You'll very rarely get things over about 1.5 inches in the wild, unless it's been recently replanted or maybe a recent burn. So as we go through, wild, Venus flytraps, and then large cultivated Venus flytraps, anything over about 3.8, 4 centimeters is really unusual. So like a 5 centimeter trap, I've seen a handful of those in collections around the world, but anything over 5 centimeter is very rare. And probably most of you know that Venus flytraps have a triggering mechanism, and those trigger hairs have to be touched, the same one twice or 2 different within a period of about 20 seconds to cause like rapid cell expansion on the outer wall of the trap, and that's what actually causes it to snap shut. For my record traps, I try not to close those traps too often without feeding them, because it does use some energy and they seem like they'll peter out if they're not grown really well. That's why a lot of new growers recommend don't trigger them for no reason, even though like a 5-year-old Jeremiah, the first thing was get the plant, close every single trap, and then wait another day, again, close every single trap. Long term, that's not the best. Now I have so many fly traps that when somebody comes over, they can go through, they can put their finger in as many as they want, as long as this isn't one that I'm going for the record. So here are what I would consider the 6 largest cultivars in my greenhouse, in my collection, and probably the 6th largest that I have seen around the world. Alien is the one that I hold the record with. It is a little more difficult to grow because it's not naturally catching any flies, any insects. It needs that extra boost through fertilizer. Green Jaw's Goliath is probably the largest one I've ever grown that still has a working trap. And so that one maxes out at just above 5 centimeters in my care. I haven't seen it much larger than 5 centimeters, but a couple people claim a little bit bigger. And then Antonov 225 is a really interesting one that is relatively new in my collection, so I haven't grown it to its maximum yet, but there are claims of a 6 centimeter trap. I haven't seen photos of it, but it looks like it's pretty darn close. Green Jaw's Montecore, in my personal collection, is the 2nd largest. So I've had 6 centimeter traps on it on multiple years, but it is also not a trapping. It can never trap anything, so it needs that fertilizer. Predator is an interesting one. It has slightly fused teeth and gets very large under my care. And then Bimbo, which gets pretty large under my care, but I sold one recently to Will Has Cool Plants, and he has been able to get it super large, super fast. So that's been a good one. So what I personally do, my soil mix, I use either a 50-50 peat moss, or sometimes I'll use 2 parts peat to 1 part perlite. I personally don't use any sand in my mix. Some growers do. Sand for me is relatively expensive in Colorado, and the peat moss and perlite is relatively cheap, so I go with a straight peat perlite mix. I've seen some people put some sphagnum over the top to keep things cool in the summer, and especially if you're in one of the southern states, I think that is really helpful, and especially for those large summer traps. It seems like anything over about 90 degrees will they'll slow down during that summer period. And so I'm high and dry in Colorado at 6,200 feet in elevation. So we get cool nights year round. And in my greenhouse, it almost never hits 90 degrees all summer. So I think relatively cool temperatures, even during the summer, really give you a little bit of a boost. As we've talked about, water quality is super important. Luckily in Colorado Springs, I'm in one of the few parts of the country where I use straight tap water for all of my Venus flytraps, and they do fine. I run at about 35 to 50 parts per million, so it's relatively low, and as long as it's not evaporating and condensing and the water overflows the whole trays, they'll be fine. But for most of the country, you need to really use rainwater, distilled water, or RO water. I do grow my Venus flytraps standing in water all summer long, so I really never let them dry out for any length of time. It will be 1 to 2 inches on average. If I'm away for a little bit, I'll have my mom water them when it gets just under maybe ½ an inch, but never dry. And then in the fall, I do let things dry out just a touch as they're going into dormancy, but not in their active growing. I do use plastic pots for all of my plants. I like square 6-inch pots that are 6-inch deep. So they're relatively large pots for Venus flytraps, and I usually grow between 4 and 5 mature plants in each of my mother pots. Then, yeah, a lot of people don't recommend clay or terracotta. The minerals can build up on those and it can cause some issues. The other thing that I really recommend is repotting every 1 to 2 years. I repot every single year. Avery's been here and he's helped me repot a couple thousand Venus flytraps the last couple years, and it's a lot of work. It'll be that Venus flytrap repot month. We go in there, talk and repot for hours and hours. Liche will also help me with that, and it's around 15,000 Venus flytraps we repot each and every year. So here's my greenhouse, kind of mid-summer growth. If I over-fertilize, I don't get as good color, so everything kind of goes just green. What I use for fertilizer is sprayed Maxi at quarter strength twice a month. So I spray it the 1st and the 15th of each month as long as I'm around, and if not, I kind of adjust it slightly. And that I have found is really good. I have seen some other experiments other people are running with a NutriCoat and like these fish pellets, and they'll hand feed each trap a wetted fish pellet along with a 360 NutriCoat, and it looks like they are getting amazing results. I don't have enough time to go and hand feed each one of my traps. I want to try it with a few this summer, but I personally haven't played around with it. But it does look like Will is getting some incredible results there. So yeah, quarter strength Maxi every 2 weeks during the growing season. The 360 NutriCoat and Bug Bites is what he's currently using. Highly recommend that if you have just a couple plants. Give it a try. He's getting incredible results. And then what I wouldn't recommend is fertilizing during dormancy. It seems to cause rot a little bit quicker. Obviously, when I was growing up, it was, oh, I'll feed him some meat or some cheese. I think most of us in here know that's not a thing now, but that was something in the early 2000s. And yeah, so more or less, feeding Venus flytraps, highly recommend it if you're already growing plants pretty well. New growers, the biggest thing I see is them not giving their plants near enough light. So it's not like feeding your Venus flytrap is gonna immediately fix a light problem. But, so then here was my exact protocol for my record-breaking season. So in January or February, actually Trevor was there and he helped me repot everything. So we clean it all up, start fresh. Because I fertilize, I get a lot more star moss growth around the pots, and that can kind of choke out the Venus flytraps and make it so that they can't get as big each growing season. So that is the main reason I'm repotting. If I didn't have the star moss, I don't think I would repot each year, but because we do get the star moss, because I fertilize so much, it really seems like it's necessary to keep things looking clean and happy. My greenhouse is basically an unheated greenhouse in Colorado. I have a small space heater in that during the dormancy period, I'll let it get down to about 20 degrees every year before that space heater kicks on. And then once I repot stuff, I then never let it freeze again, hopefully. So once they're repotted, they're a little more delicate right after, so then I try and keep it above 35 degrees. And then the greenhouse will really start warming up in April, because we'll still get frosts down to 22, 23 degrees middle of May. It snowed the day before we came to this conference, so it's still something you have to deal with. But in the greenhouse, you can adjust it a little bit. Most of the Venus flytraps are really starting to wake up and look good by May. And I got my largest ever trap. It was June 7th is when it was officially measured. So it was relatively early in the season, I would say. My personal opinion is my flytraps look best around September. They've had all summer to grow, they color up. We're still May, June, they're still a little green and they haven't colored up quite as much. So yeah, I'd say I'd average my largest traps in August, give or take. Again, as long as you're not letting it get too hot. Then in September and October, I taper off feeding, so I'm no longer spraying with Maxi by the end of September, reduce the water a little bit, preparing for dormancy, let everything have a good hard frost to really get them condensed into their pot, and then start repotting again come January and February, with the hopes to be done by early February. So how it was measured, so it has to be exactly touching the ruler itself. So there is the exact trap that does hold the record there. So if anyone does break this, let me know and I will get you in contact with Guinness, because it is something so fun and it's like trying to push this hobby forward. I hope to get a 7-centimeter trap here in the next year or two. We'll see. I know Matzig in Germany is going for a 10-centimeter trap in his lifetime, which I could see that happening, especially with his breeding. And then when I got that trap after it was officiated by Guinness, I did cut off the whole leaf and I stuck it in a jar of alcohol. So I still have that setting on my table and I have it out on display for every open day I run. So it's always fun to see that. So I'd recommend it. If you do break the record, save the trap, put it in alcohol, and it's a fun memory you can have. So mistakes that I'd say either new growers or even people that have been growing for a while, I think we went over most of these, but tap water and minerals, definitely not going to work out well. Too much shade, and there's a fine balance, because I do feel like to get the absolute largest traps, you probably don't want them in absolute full sun. Now, for most of my other plants, I keep them in full sun, beautiful color, and they look amazing, but they seem just ever so slightly smaller. So not shady, but not absolute full sun if you're going for the world record. Skipping dormancy. Now people can do that in a flytrap. I've grown them for 10 years without dormancy, but I never get as big growth. So that early spring boost just really seems to be a need. And most people in North Carolina or this area, their flytraps will naturally go dormant anyway. So don't skip dormancy if you're going for a record. And then over-fertilization. And so you do have to find the right balance for your conditions, because again, if you over-fertilize, you'll get a lot of traps, a lot of green traps, and maybe not those single biggest ones. So just balance your fertilization, start low, and then work your way up until you're starting to see problems, and then you can cut back again. And also, if a typical Venus flytrap is probably not going to break the record anymore. It's either cool ones that have been bred, or you need to start with one of the giant clones to give yourself the best shot. But if you start with a couple giant clones and then breed your own, that would be the way to go. So where I'd recommend buying carnivorous plants, obviously I sell them, but also Carnivorous, California Carnivores, and the Flytrap shop are three amazing places to buy Venus flytraps. eBay is another great place where you can get some really neat clones, and some of them you don't have to pay a small fortune for. And then obviously to learn more, the ICPS is just incredible, and they put on events like this. Venus Flytrap Enthusiasts on Facebook always has really good information where people are kind of pushing the boundaries of the clones, the sizes, and how big these plants can get. And I really like Savage Gardens on Reddit, and there are quite a few carnivorous plant YouTube channels that I find really, really interesting. And then supplies. A lot of people ask me where I get my supplies. So my peat moss, I use the Premier brand, where I just get it from Lowe's or Home Depot, whichever has the cheapest one that year. It's pretty consistent. It's not perfect, but for me, I've been using it for about 7 or 8 years now and couldn't be happier. And then my Perlite brand is PVP, and I get them in big 4 cubic foot bags. And that's my favorite brand of Perlite. My plastic pots, I just get off Amazon or Greenhouse Megastore, and it's easy enough for everyone there. But yeah, so this is me, and if we have any questions, especially about growing Venus flytraps, I think we'll open it up to that about now.
All right, thank you, Jeremiah.
So, I was curious to know if you found that Venus flytraps, they have a tendency to form clumps and clusters of their own over time. Have you found that clustering behavior will actually tend to, even if it's very pretty mixed and nice display, tends to form as the smaller traps, or perhaps, or does that have an impact on trap size? How can you either reduce or if you want to have a nice display, induce cluster?
Got it. It's a very good question. So the question was about the clustering nature of Venus flytraps. It is a big thing. Honestly, like all those clones up there are very hesitant to cluster. So if anyone's ever grown alien before, if you get 1 or 2 divisions off of your mother plant each year, you're doing pretty well. And I think that is one of the things that have helped it make such large traps, is because it doesn't cluster. Of those, I would say none of them are big cluster growers, because as you said, exactly, as soon as a Venus flytrap clusters up, that energy goes to the little divisions and offshoots, and then they go back to their 1/2 inch to maybe 1 inch traps and are much, much smaller. So yeah, of those, Monticore, very hesitant to cluster. Like for me to propagate it, I almost am always doing like back rhizome divisions. So each year pull off a little bit of the back, hopefully not on my largest ones, because I get such little clustering on those. Where some clones of Venus flytraps really cluster heavily. And yeah, I don't think any of those will probably ever set a new record for it, honestly. But yeah, very good question.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
I would like to know if you're fertilizing the medium too, or just traps.
So I spray everything. So in the greenhouse, so it's a 16 by 8 foot greenhouse. When I spray it with Maxi, I use a little hand pump, and that whole greenhouse, I'll use about 2 gallons worth every 2 weeks. So it's not like I'm just going around feeding the little traps. It's just a broad spray over everything, because with that many mother plants, I think this year I counted 462 different varieties of Venus flytrap mother pots. So I don't have time to like just fertilize the traps. I will try it with those bug bites and Nutricoat, hopefully this year, but it's already kind of late into the season to make a record if they're not already going. But good question.
All right, other questions? Oh, gotcha.
I was wondering, what do you think causes dormancy more? Is it a daylight thing, or is it a cooling temperature? Is it a combination of both?
Yeah. So the question, like, what causes dormancy? And I mean, I think it's totally both. So in my greenhouse, I mean, the temperatures are cooling. I do have some lights on one side of the greenhouse that is closer to the structure. I don't ever adjust that photo period, but the natural photo period in Colorado is starting to get less and less as the summer progresses. A few years when I didn't have time to pot everything up immediately, I unpotted them, threw them in a Ziploc bag with a small handful of somewhat dry sphagnum moss, and threw them in the fridge. And they were in there for 3 months when I had time to pot them up after a big trip to Australia and New Zealand. They did perfectly fine. I would say they weren't my biggest ever, but I didn't see any noticeable damage by throwing them in the fridge. So if you live in like southern Florida and you want to do that, it's definitely a very apt thing you could.
How do you compress the soil? Do you worry about capillary effects when you compress? Do you have a protocol for how much you compress something?
Very good question, and actually Avery and I have talked about this multiple times. I am a very light compressor because I know you guys at California Carnivores and Drew are pack it in as tight as you can, where I'm just very lightly sprinkle it on top, give it a little pat. It's the first thing when somebody's helping me out. I'm like, okay, I don't want it really compressed. It's just light enough that it'll hold the Venus flytraps in place. And then when I top water it, I don't want the soil to drop more than like a ½ inch. So I'm a very light compressor. And I would say a lot of that honestly came from the Mansells in Australia when I was helping them repot some Nepenthes. They were like just ever so slightly drop the sphagnum moss on top, and the roots were able to go through it easier. So I'm a very light compressor.
Hey, good morning. First of all, thank you for the great presentation. And I'm sure a lot of us would agree that bigger is better. I do have a question on 2 points here. One is on your slide about cutting off the flower stalks
Yeah.
in April. What do you do with those? And the other part of it is, I really like snappy traps. What do you notice about snappiness in your collection?
Got it. So flower stalks. So if I'm around and I have time, I do cut off most of my flower stalks unless I'm doing a breeding with it. For anything that I'm trying to make a record on, I definitely cut them off. I'd say 90% of the flower stalks just go into my compost bin, and then only those few that I really need to propagate more of, I do cut off and I stick in pure longfire sphagnum moss at the flower stalk itself. And say about 60 to 80% of the time, I'll get some offshoots at the bottom, and it takes about a full season before they will reach maturity, but it's a great way to get some of these rarer clones propagated. And then Snappy Trap, I don't grow Snappy Trap. I know of a grower named Snappy Trap that has some good fertilizer, but yeah, don't actually grow Snappy Trap as a cultivar.
Trying to grow the largest traps, have you ever experimented with pinching traps? I see that your Guinness record plant there looks pretty full. Have you ever experimented with pinching traps to try to force energy into a couple of them to see if you can get a larger trap?
A large trap? No. Okay. So the question: have I ever like pulled off the other traps to try and put the energy into one? And like a lot of plant people do that. Like if you're growing, what are they, mums, you'll try and get it into one large flower and it's spectacular. I've literally never tried that. So it would be super interesting to see if you pinched off all the old ones. Now I think it would probably only be beneficial on something like Alien where they're not actually trapping something with that trap, because I think you'd be better off feeding the active traps than pinching them off. But something like Alien, which isn't going to catch anything in those traps, maybe it would help, but I'm thinking it's still photosynthesizing. So, but something to try for sure.
Question about kind of like, I think about a Guinness World Record holder that's almost a mad scientist. Have you ever tried any gibberellin and types of like crazy chemicals to get your trackers?
Yes, so I mean, playing around with different fertilizers, I have. Gibberellic acid, I've only used it for other carnivorous plant experiments, never for Venus flytraps. So like some of the bibulus, it really will help them germinate if you soak them in that first. So I haven't played around with any, acids, chemicals with Venus flytraps. I've tried like Osmocote, Nutricote, Growmore. Sam in Hawaii was a big Growmore fertilizer fan. Honestly, like Maxi, I don't think it's necessarily better than a lot of other things, but it's an easy one to get in the US, easy to mix up, and it's very hard for a beginner to make a mistake with Maxi, and so it's just something that I've had success with it. I mean, I would definitely try Osmocote, I would try Nutricote, and especially with some of the growth I've seen off of some other growers, it would definitely be worthwhile, but any other weird chemicals, never have. Yep.
My question's about growing from seed. So, what would you say is the first step? I've heard some people do like cold stratification period with like paper towels. Do you have to do that? What's your...
Got it. So like growing Venus flytraps from seed, I have never cold stratified them. So it's definitely not necessary. I think with Sarracenia, it does make a bigger difference, where with flytraps, it seems like their seed ripens a lot earlier in the season than Sarracenia. So I think you're good, just plant it. Now, if you do not fertilize flytrap seedlings, they will take forever to mature, and you're in it for a 4 to 5 year haul. So heavy fertilization as soon as they're more than maybe a 1/4 inch is really gonna speed up the process. So fertilize them and it'll grow a lot quicker, or wait 5 to 6 years before you see anything. Yeah, Maxi. I have used Maxi on every single carnivorous plant I grow without any ill effects. I use it at a relatively low strength. If I was doing seedling Sarracenia, more close to 1,000 part per million in the pitcher itself while it's young. But then once the erect Sarracenia get a little bit taller, I don't do any fertilization on Sarracenia unless it has purpurea or psittacina in one of the lineage. And then I do find it helps a bit, but the erect ones, they seem to go a little green if you over fertilize. And
then we got one more.
one more.
I have 2 questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So one of them is, can insecticides affect the size of a flytrap and the health? Because I use Safari. I don't know if you use that or anyone else uses it, but does that affect it?
A very good question. So like, will insecticides damage fly traps? And I would say for sure some will. So if I had pests on fly traps this year, I did have some mites on a few early on, and I used Avid. And that is one that doesn't seem to affect the fly trap's growth. I don't get any spotting on it. But then I did try another one, and I got a little spotting on my Sarracenia, but I used the same one on fly traps and no damage at all on fly traps. So I mean, I'm sure some insecticides will affect fly traps, but I haven't found any where they're really susceptible to it. I think you're way better off if you do have a pest, cure it as soon as possible, and even the damage from a little bit of insecticide is probably less than the damage from, like, if you get aphids, they can really mess up a fly trap very quickly, but aphids are also very easy to control. Mites are a little bit, they'll kind of cause these weird misshapen traps, and the traps tend to be really small. So if you're going for record fly traps, you gotta get rid of those mites as soon as you see them.
And also, when you say 1/4 strength of max, do you mean like a 1/4 teaspoon a gallon?
Exactly, 1/4 teaspoon per gallon. So it usually comes out to a little bit less than 400 parts per million, depending on what water I'm using, because again, I just use my Colorado Springs tap water. So I'd recommend start less than 400 parts per million for those waterings, and then as you see how things progress, but be consistent with it. So it's not like, oh, just once in the spring and things will be good. It's every 2 weeks, and that's why I go for the 1st and the 15th of every month. It's like, okay, today's fertilizer day, make up my Maxi, spray it on everything, and then I'm good to go again.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we got one last question in the back to make it whole.
Alright, you mentioned that Elgin and Bonsicore are like the non-functional or hard to replace traps. Do you think that's the ideal trap to grow for a world record because they don't trigger as easily?
It's a very, very good question. And I do think that about that 6 centimeter size is gonna be as large as a functional trap will get. I did listen to a couple talks like how the mechanics work, and once they get over that 5 centimeter, it just seems like it can't move over the breaking point to close the trap itself. So yeah, I would be shocked if we see like a 7 centimeter working trap. So it's a little disappointing that the thing that got probably all of us into carnivorous plants is kind of the bred out of it to get those really monstrosity and those huge size. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm hoping we can get it over 7 centimeter and still have a working trap, but I would be a little surprised. I think those cashew traps right now are really the only ones that'll get noticeably above 6 centimeters.
Awesome. Thank you,
Oh,
Jennifer.
thank you so much.
That's exactly what happens. So thank you so much. And our next talk is going to be